You may see me as a priest and think that in my spare time I sit down watching the Song of Bernadette and all of that. Well, there's no further from the truth. I'd rather be taking tips from Nuns on the Run, which is a great film if you've never seen it, than Song of Bernadette. But I have to say, my favourite film of all time has to be, and I'm so cultured, so sophisticated, as you can see, my favourite film of all time is Shrek. Absolutely love it. And it's not just because I look like the main character. Shrek, that is, not any of the others. And if you've never seen Shrek, do go and watch it. And if you've never seen the version on stage, go and see that. It's incredible. I believe Rougemont has just done it on stage, and it was very good, I believe. I have my sources to tell me, one of the first in the country, I believe, to do it in the school. Such an incredible stage version of it. And if you've never seen it, let me tell you all about it. It tells the story of an ugly green ogre named Shrek. Looks a bit like me, but just in green. Who lives alone in a swamp far, far away. And he discovers one day, much to his annoyance and frustration, that his beloved swamp has been taken over by fairy tale creatures. And these fairy tale creatures themselves have been thrown out and ousted by the evil and scheming Lord Farquaad. I've got to be very careful how I say that. It could go very wrong very quickly. And so as the story unfolds of the film Shrek, what the film does, it highlights a number of turning point moments for the different characters. These turning point moments, as you follow it along, sometimes you feel that these are opportunities lost. But you've got to bear with it. Let it work itself out. And so you have the main protagonist, Shrek, who himself quite early on arrives at an important turning point moment for him. And that's in his agreeing to go and rescue Princess Fiona from where she's been held captive. If you remember, in the big tower, of course, and this is fairy tale land with a dragon to guard. We've all been there, I think. For Shrek, that turning point moment, as it plays out, will mean that things will never be the same again. Even his home, his swamp, will never quite be the same again. But even Princess Fiona herself, she longs and looks out the window, longing for her Prince Charming to arrive, longing to be rescued. But her turning point moment comes in a different way. And that's in her being able to come to terms with the reality of her beauty, with the reality of what beauty actually looks like, and what love looks like when that's reciprocated. I won't give any more away than that. If you've never seen the film, go and see it. I would say go to Blockbusters, but it doesn't exist anymore. Significant turning point moments have been huge points in our history. Significant moments of our history have begun by simple turning point moments. We can think perhaps about Rosa Parks, who on the 1st of December 1955 refused to give up her seat on a bus. What we could see then as an act of defiance actually becomes the beginnings of the civil rights movement. What an impact that turning point moment had for her. Or again, consider Steve Jobs. We all know him as the founder of Apple, and I think nearly all of us here at some point in our lives have sold our soul down that road. We've all been there. And of course we know that Steve Jobs was ousted from the very company that he had founded. Can you believe it? And that could have been a breaking point for him. But that breaking point became a huge turning point. Because in his turning point moment enabled him things to become a catalyst to reinvent himself, and his eventual then return to the company, the great return. This last week, I was sitting down in a coffee shop somewhere in town, and I did something which I never ever do. I went on my phone. This is a great sin, by the way. I went back on my phone and I went to look at what I preached about 3 years ago. And lucky for you, I haven't preached it before, because I've not quite been here 3 years yet. Poor things. And 3 years ago, when these same readings came around last time, we were in the journey out of one of the most significant turning point moments in our modern history. Can you remember what it is? COVID. Because you go, oh, God. But the COVID pandemic became, for so many people, I know personally, a huge turning point moment for them. That the positives that came out of such an event, both here and in my previous parish, in the cathedral parish, it paved the way for personal turning point moments for individuals. Whether it was a change of career, where people were furloughed and they reevaluated things, whether it was themselves being able to come to faith and explore the desire to be received into the church. That was certainly the case for a number of people in the cathedral parish. There were many who found themselves in a situation and then so started to reprioritize things, reprioritize the insignificance of family life over work, perhaps, where an imbalance might have taken place. What wonderful turning point moments brought about such wonderful graces during probably was one of the most difficult times of our history. We hear quite often, don't we, and we hear it in the media, people speak of crisis. Crisis perhaps within society, crisis within the church maybe, crisis within politics, dare I say it. And what's interesting is that the word crisis, as I'm interested in words, when you look at the etymology of it, the word crisis just means a turning point moment. So all these crises become great turning point moments. And so when those disciples found themselves in that boat, they reached their own crisis point moment in the middle of that storm. And that crisis time was a significant moment for them. It was make or break, fight or flight, if you like, in the midst of the tumult. So they turned to Jesus, who is himself asleep on a cushion. While we think that Jesus does not care about the crisis moments of our lives, Jesus is in fact there, at the very heart of the situations which we face, encouraging us, supporting us to faith. Because it's in crisis moments where we realize that we are not self-sufficient, that we can't do this by ourselves. What did the pandemic teach us? For if we can try to do things by ourselves, we struggle and begin to sink beneath the waves of the storm. And so we turn to him. In those moments of crisis in our lives, our prayer becomes that of the disciples. Master, we're going down. His response to us is a great response of love and affection of a father. Quiet now, be calm. We can look within our own archdiocese and we can see that we have reached a significant turning point moment in our own history as the report on the proposed unification of the two dioceses has been sent to Rome for their consideration. In some ways, we can see ourselves here in this little portion of the Lord's vineyard, becoming overwhelmed by some of the concerns about the future. What's going to happen next? What does it mean for us here in this parish? Where are the new seeds of vocations going to come from? Because as Canon Mike says in Barry, he says there's no cavalry coming over the mountain. How will the parish look as we continue to engage with what Archbishop Mark describes as the new apostolic era? With so many of these huge questions, things can become rather overwhelming, can't they? And perhaps we find ourselves being able to relate to the disciples, turning to Jesus in our frustration and saying, "Master, do you not care?" But we have the consolation that Jesus is there with us, whispering into the very context of our lives. Quiet now, be calm. Pope Francis said that we do not come out of a crisis the same as we did before. We either come out better or worse, but never the same. Just like that film Shrek, sometimes we have to hand ourselves over, to trust, to make ourselves vulnerable, to be able to respond generously, even if our responses remain still a bit unclear. Jesus remains close to us. That cushion in the gospel is a significant symbol of this. Amen.